So KCD2 is launching tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow, at least depending on where you are in the world. Anyway, it'll sort of start rolling out tomorrow, and pretty much within the next 24 to 48 hours, it'll be out for everyone. And with that, it is time to cover every single thing you need to know about this game in my ultimate preview for Kingdom Come Deliverance II. Now, starting off with the basics, we're going to talk about the setting and just the general overview of the game. This game is set in 15th century Bohemia, which is what we currently know these days as Czechia or the Czech Republic, and it follows a story of a character named Henry, who is the main protagonist of the first game as well. Now, something to keep in mind with this game is that you don't necessarily need to have played the first game in order to play this one. You can pick this up as your first entry into the franchise. I will say it's definitely recommended to play the first game, just so you can get the sort of backstory on each of these characters and stuff like that. But the way that this story will start out and seemingly what happens throughout the story seems as though it will still be a good starting point for anyone who is completely new to the story. They're going to start it off in a way that it's not like you're dropped immediately into the middle of a story and you don't know what's going on. It is technically kind of a standalone story from the first game, even though it does still have a lot of the same characters. And so that is worth keeping in mind. If you haven't played the first game, you don't really need to. And hell, if you do want to know what happened in the first game, considering that game is so damn long, it might actually be worth just kind of watching a recap before you play this game, or hell, play this game first and then go back and almost play the first game as a prequel. Now, something else very important about the setting of this game is that Warhorse Studios have been very, very big on keeping as much historical accuracy as they can. It was much the same in the first Kingdom Come game, where these are some of the most historically accurate games that have really ever been made, at least in this genre anyway. Like I said in a previous video, there are a lot of RTS games and stuff that are very historically accurate, but in terms of this more action adventure open world RPG type of setting, this is definitely up there as one of the most historically accurate games we have ever seen, with Warhorse Studios doing a lot of work with historians and stuff like that in order to make this game really immersive and really true to what actually went on in 15th century Bohemia. Now, in terms of the platforms and the different editions and stuff for the game, it is, like I said, launching on February 4th, and it will be launching on PC, PS5, and on the Xbox Series X and S. And there are 3 different editions for this game. Now, I've got a full video breaking down every single thing if you want to go and look at that. That covered every single item in detail, essentially. But the most important thing to probably know about these 3 editions is that the Gold Edition is probably the best bang for your buck, because it comes with the expansion pass, which actually includes 3 DLC packs, which will be coming in summer, autumn, and winter 2025. So this year there's going to be 3 different DLC packs coming for this game. How big they are, we aren't really too sure just yet, but considering the Gold Edition is about $90 US, whereas the Standard Edition is $70 US, that extra $20 for 3 DLC packs plus some skins and stuff like that is honestly very, very worth it. Now, one of the more crucial elements to Kingdom Come Deliverance, and obviously it was like that in the first game and even more so in the second game, is the combat. This is probably one of the biggest selling points with this game because it has some very, very realistic and immersive combat. Obviously the game is in first person, so we are right up there in the action, and the combat from the first game is something that received a lot of praise and, like I said, has only been improved on in this second installment into the franchise. Now, once again, I do have a full video on all of the ins and outs of the combat if you want a more in-depth breakdown, so be sure to check that one out as well. But for the sake of this video, all you guys really need to know is that the combat is, once again, very immersive, very realistic, and they have massively improved on that combat from the first game. From all the people who have done previews and stuff like that, they've said it feels a lot more fluid and also a lot more rewarding and stuff than the first game. They've also pretty massively enhanced the stealth as well. There's a lot of cool new features there, even to do with the clothes that you're wearing will actually impact the stealth, for example. So if you're wearing a heavy armor set, you're going to be a bit louder, and that means you are easier for the enemies to hear. Whereas if you're wearing lighter clothes or even dark clothes, for example, you will blend in a bit more. And so it seems the stealth has been massively improved on. Now, they've also added some more ranged attacks than the first game. The first game did have bows, but that was essentially it. And you also couldn't use them on horseback. In this game, they have not only implemented horseback archery, which is really exciting to see, but on top of just the regular bows, we also now have crossbows and even some early firearms too, because obviously in the 15th century, it's not like they had legitimate guns back then, but they were sort of starting to use firearms a little bit more in terms of those really early, musket type weapons. And obviously all of this fits in very much so with that time period, because like I said before, it's all really historically accurate. Now, before we go any further, if you guys are interested in more KCD2 content after launch, be sure to hit that subscribe button. There is plenty more content on the way. You guys can expect to see plenty of guides and tips and tricks type of videos on the channel, as well as where to find all the best items and stuff like that. So make sure you don't miss out. Now, something very important to note in this game is that they've actually got two separate maps in the game. It's not technically two entirely different maps. They're all sort of in the same play space, but there will be two technical maps within the game. Now, the first one that we're going to touch on is Kuttenberg, which is essentially a major city. It was built around silver mines, and it is apparently during this period in Europe, one of the richest cities in all of Europe, essentially. So this is an absolutely bustling city, and I dare say it's going to be very fun to explore. There is then also the second sort of region, which is the Trotsky region, a much more rural and sort of scenic map, much more out in the open compared to the sort of city setting of Kuttenberg. They have also pretty much confirmed that the playable area in this game is essentially double that of the first game. And the first game, as far as I remember, did have a pretty damn big map. So that is definitely very exciting. Obviously, it needs to be filled out and, you know, lived in order for it to be good. The size of a map doesn't necessarily equal a good map, but I've got a good feeling that it's going to be a very enjoyable map, and having double the playable area, if done properly, is definitely a good thing. Now, speaking a little bit more about the size of the game, not just talking about the map, but the actual game itself, this game is said to be roughly twice as big as the first game. Now, the first game took about 40 odd hours to complete the main story, and then roughly 130 hours to get 100% in terms of essentially doing everything that you could. Now, with that, we could be looking at maybe an 80 or, you know, maybe even down to like a 70-hour story, which is still freaking enormous, and then potentially over 200 hours of overall content in terms of all the side content and stuff like that. Now, keep in mind that is just a guess as of right now. They haven't said that outright or anything, so we don't know that for sure, but yeah, they've sort of hinted at the game being essentially like twice as big. Not necessarily exactly twice as big, but it's just going to be a lot bigger than the first game. And based on the time it took to beat that first game, that means this game is going to be absolutely enormous. Now, in terms of some of the additions and stuff that they've made a lot of great little quality of life improvements. One of the most impressive things that I've seen them talk about is the new like guild system that they've put in this game. So you can essentially join guilds such as, for example, millers, blacksmiths, and hunters. And each of those guilds will have not only their own specific perks that you can gain from joining them, so there's stuff that you'll learn, there's skills you'll get and stuff like that, but even their own quest lines as well for each guild. And that alone, I'm sure, also adds a lot to the game overall, because the game would already be massive, let alone having new quest lines for each guild. I'm sure there is going to be a lot of stuff for us to do. Now, touching again just quickly on the size of the game, something I forgot to mention too is that this game has apparently got the longest game script ever, with over 2.2 million words in the overall scripting for the game. So it is going to be absolutely enormous. For a bit of context, Baldur's Gate 3 currently owns that, I guess, title or record as the longest game script ever. That had about 2 million words in the overall scripting for that game. And like I said, this one has about 2.2 million. That's what the devs are saying anyway. So there is definitely going to be a lot of speech in this game, from cutscenes and stuff like that to even just, you know, you're riding along on your horse and characters are talking to you. There's going to be a lot of dialogue. And obviously that means there is going to be a hell of a lot of story for us to take in as the player. In terms of some more additions too, they have also massively improved on the crafting mechanics and even the alchemy system, for example. Even when it comes to like cooking and stuff, they've confirmed you can now not only just cook food, but you can dry and smoke foods as well, which will obviously kind of give you different benefits and stuff like that. So they've kind of gone even further when it comes to like adding a bit of depth to the systems that were already in place in the first Kingdom Come Deliverance. That game already, to me anyway, felt pretty damn deep in a lot of ways, and it seems like they're only just fleshing out those areas even further, which I'm sure a lot of people are going to really enjoy. Now, lastly, just touching on a few of these sort of smaller details, one thing that has really impressed me so far, they've pretty much confirmed there are only 2 loading screens in this game. The rest of the game is entirely seamless, and the only loading screens that we're going to be having are one, when we actually load into the game. So obviously we boot the game up, it's going to load our save, and that obviously has a loading screen. And then the only other time in the entire game that we'll get hit with a loading screen is when we actually travel between the 2 maps. Outside of that, it is entirely seamless. So if you walk through doors and stuff into a house or into a castle or anything like that, there will essentially never ever be a loading screen. And that is something I definitely appreciate, especially when it's a game of this scale. That makes it even more impressive. They've also mentioned they're making a lot of improvements to the user experience, like some more intuitive inventory systems, some sort of clearer explanations when it comes to a lot of different items in the game and stuff like that. And it just seems like the overall quality of life seems to be a really big thing that they're focusing on, which is probably needed from the first game. It was a really good game, but it was maybe a little bit rough around the edges at times. And so it's good to say they are focusing a lot more on improving the overall quality of life in the second installment into the franchise. But that is it for my ultimate preview for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Like I said, it's only about a day or two away now, depending on where you are. And like I said, there is going to be so much content here on the channel. So if you are new, be sure to hit that subscribe button. You do not want to miss out. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.